Peter, thanks so much for joining me. And I wanted to talk to you about where we are now in the trade war with China, because I mentioned your book in the opening there for our viewers, because it is so important to understand what is currently going on between China and the U.S. and this ongoing trade war. Tell us, what is the latest on this, and how is the great decoupling going between the United States and China?
Well, I think Donald Trump deserves a lot of credit for taking this issue on in a very real and direct way. A lot of the focus in his talk about the trade issue has been on issues like deindustrialization in the United States, the trade imbalance, et cetera. But I think lurking behind that is the larger issue of what I would call a Trump grand strategy involving China. If you look at what the trade policy is, it's really geared to changing China's behavior, not just on economic matters or on exports, but on things like fentanyl. There's a specific tariff on China because of China's involvement. I would say they're really the senior partner in the fentanyl trade and the effect that it's having on the United States. But if you look at other topics like the Panama Canal, there's been this discussion about the Panama Canal. The focus is on Chinese control and the desire to get rid of, Chinese management on both ends of the Panama Canal. I think even when you look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the efforts to negotiate a peace deal there, regardless of what one thinks about what the details of what that agreement should be, clearly this is part of a Trump effort to, in a sense, move Russia away from China, further isolating China globally. So I think this is a full-on press with China. We're at a waiting game right now. China's saying they're not going to negotiate. Trump doesn't indicate that he's going to weaken any. But I do think time is on the president's side here. Yes, the increase of goods in the United States may go up. There may be some economic disruptions. But the media reports out of China are that tens of thousands of Chinese are losing their jobs because factories are being closed. This is an economy driven primarily by exporting to the United States and exporting to the Western world. If they can't do that very effectively, they're in deep economic trouble.
Well, Peter, I'm so glad you talked about the grand strategy here, because I think people miss this big picture here by looking at, what are prices doing today or tomorrow and that sort of thing, which is all important, of course. But we've seen now factory orders in China have now plummeted to their lowest level in 16 months. But we're also seeing, we know now that China has engaged in all sorts of practices, mercantilist practices, currency manipulation, dumping of goods, intellectual property theft. And as you suggest, China is also behind so many things, from Iran to Pakistan to Ukraine. They're the bad actor in a lot of this. The aim here then must be then to get China to change a behavior that's also not going well for it, because its own economy has become very out of balance by their own behavior.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the media coverage in the United States, and a lot of it, by the way, being driven by Wall Street firms who have huge financial interests in China and whose access to that vast Chinese market is predicated on being on good terms with the CCP. If you follow that coverage, you would think the United States is in big trouble and China has the upper hand. That is simply not the equation when you look at the numbers. So I think, look, Trump deserves a lot of credit. He hasn't executed it perfectly by any means, but he deserves a lot of credit for actually taking this issue on. Presidents have talked about it. Barack Obama talked about it a little bit. Trump did in his first term. Joe Biden sort of tipped his hat to the rise of China and the threat that China represented, but nobody wanted to confront them. And the way that you have to confront China, similar to what Ronald Reagan did during the Cold War, you have to play to their weaknesses, not to their strength. And China's weakness strategically is its dependence on exports to the West. That is the engine that drives their economy, and their economy is sputtering, and this is, a deep problem. So I think President Xi is confronted by this reality of that he does not want to lose face to Donald Trump, but on the other hand, his economy is tottering, and things are only going to get worse. Let's remember, big American companies like Apple have announced they are going to pull production of the iPhone for the U.S. market completely out of China. They're going to move all the production to India. So there are more shoes to drop as time goes along. That is not a good situation for President Xi.